It's Richard Geller here with Mitch Steven. How you doing, Mitch?
I'm doing fine, Richard. How are you?
I could not be better. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Just really excited about getting into this material we have right now because we have a lot of people asking us, this is a great question to have, about closing deals. And so what I thought we'd cover on this training is, I thought we'd cover just another look at whether you should do the deal at all, quick sale strategies. There's some really cool strategies, and I'm going to call them plan A, B, C, and D. And, you know, I want you to think about maybe selling this property really quickly even before you take title to it. And we'll talk about the flow of paperwork, and we'll end up talking about fixing things up. There's a lot less fix-up than what you might think, or maybe none at all. I know some of you have been doing a lot of rehabs and fix and flips, and some of you have been doing rental properties. And what's cool about this whole approach is that we don't have to rent the properties out and we don't have to fix them up. And when I mean we don't have to fix them up, I mean we really don't have to fix them up at all. So we'll get into that a little bit today. Does that sound good, Mitch?
Sounds perfect. I'm ready to go.
All right, man. Well, I'd like to talk about what we do as far as valuation. You know, when we're going to be closing a deal, we also may be getting a lender or a note buyer involved, and so they may want an appraisal. And what do you do as far as appraisals, get comps? Do you ever do appraisals? Do you ever do BPOs, CMAs? We can talk about that.
Well, I mean, I do CMAs. I mean, I do my own market research, but I don't order appraisals either when I'm buying or when I'm selling, and I don't do, you know, I just do my own CMAs, my own market analysis.
And is that just a matter of expense, or is there another angle to it?
Well, no, it's just, I mean, it's a matter of expense why I don't order appraisals, but then appraisals don't really affect me as much, because when I go to sell, I don't need an appraisal because, you know, I'm carrying the note. I'm owner financing, so what I want to know is what are the rents, you know? I want to know what the rents go for, and this stuff can be found on the internet under different places like finestexpert.com or rentalmeter.com, and so because I'm going to back into the rent to arrive at a principal and interest payment plus taxes and insurance. So, and then when I'm buying it, if I thought getting an official appraisal would help me knock $10,000 off the price, I would go ahead and pay the $350, $450, whatever it costs in your area, if you think that'll help you. But I don't really suggest spending money on deals that you don't own yet, you know, and that you might not be able to negotiate. So I just do, you know, pick the grid where this house is or the neighborhood where this house is and become an expert on everything that's sold in the last 6 months and find a per square foot average.
Right. That's about it. So what we're doing is we're getting a monthly payment that we're kind of backing into it as part of our deal. And you can just go to Craigslist. I was just talking to a person last night. We were talking about their area, which is Gainesville, Florida, saying, well, you know, how do we figure out what to charge for that house? And it's like a 3-bedroom house. Now, you can look at apartments, you can look at house rentals, and just kind of get a feel for it. So we got a feel for a 3-bedroom, and we've ended up looking at comparable things, $700, something like that, a month. So that would give us a good idea of what we can charge principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, more or less, around $700, maybe $800, maybe $850. But it's pretty easy. You can go to Rentometer or all that, but you can also just go on Craigslist and just take a really good look and get a very good idea right that way. Just so back to the appraisal though. Yeah, I used to order drive-by appraisals, but I don't do that anymore. There's really no point to it. But a drive-by appraisal is not done as much anymore. But actually, you can pretty much tell what a property is worth without even going out there after a while. if you could see a picture of it. And if you do an interior appraisal, it's going to cost you, could be $300 or $400. Then I just want to explain briefly what a BPO is, a broker's price opinion. What the lenders do when they're looking to approve a short sale, they a lot of times will do a BPO rather than an appraisal. I've seen BPOs done about to the same quality standards as appraisals with photos of different comps and all of this, and then I've seen some that are like on one sheet of paper. So I don't think there's necessarily a big standard for BPOs, but the lender pays a broker around $70 to go out and give a valuation of a property. So that's what a BPO is. You could certainly do your own BPO, and I've done them, and it's not that expensive, but it doesn't really necessarily give you a whole lot that you really need. And then there's a CMA, which is just basically the agent comparative market analysis. It's the agent just listing some comps and giving you an idea of value without actually having to go out and look at the property at all. So.
Yeah, but this is the most critical part of the whole business. I mean, you have to be able to establish value, and you have to be able to do it quickly. There's several different ways to do it. I mean, you know, I once wrote a pretty in-depth piece on how to, you know, why a realtor should give you their PIN number. You know, all the reasons why they should. You'll find that agents will kind of guard that and try to tell you that you can't, you know, they're not allowed to give it out or anything. But then they all have a secretary that has it, and they all have an assistant that has it. And so you really need to approach them as, I'm going to be your listing agent assistant, because I'm going to be looking at like 30 houses to buy one, and making offers on 30 houses to buy one. And the other 29 houses, I'm going to do my best to make sure that they get listed by you. They're not already listed. So in short sales, of course, they're already listed. But when you're dealing with private owners, they're not. And so that's why, one of the reasons why they should give you that PIN number.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess if you can't get it from somebody that way, you might be able to make an arrangement with someone where you could pay them a few bucks and be a kind of an assistant or an apprentice to them, technically, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's what you want to do. Is you want to, what you really want to approach them as is helping them. I want to help you get more listings, and I'm going to be out there talking to a lot of people, and I need to be able to get on the MLS so I can establish value. So that's the big one. But it could, other ways move into paying. You know, they all have dues that they have to pay for that, and sometimes it's not cheap depending on where you're at, and a lot of them will take a little financial help on those dues. There's now some real estate clubs, and I think you can like buy into the MLS database. And I know people that are not realtors that have the same database. They don't call it the same thing, but it is the same thing.
Yeah, there's one that I like called Sawbuck, which is the MLS, pretty much the MLS for the public consumption. I mean, it doesn't have some of the features, but it certainly has the listings, and it doesn't have all MLSs, but it does have a lot of them. And I think that's going to be an increasing trend. Realtor.com, of course, is the officially sanctioned sort of MLS for ordinary people, but it doesn't have the things that the agents get to look at. So it really is better if you can get a PIN number and of an agent. It's much, much better. You're going to be able to do all kinds of things you just can't do any other way. It makes life much simpler. All right, so let's move on, because we have already talked about valuation quite a bit, about how to do that. I just wanted to, so this is really the big thing about all of these deals, is you just don't want to be over a loan to value of 65%, and on cheaper houses you want to be below that. You certainly don't want to be over 70% when things are done. In other words, if you have to put some work in and closing costs, you don't want to be over 70%. That's really important.
Here's the formula. If you, I don't know if you can write on this thing or not.
Sure,
Richard, but
sure I can.
It's the ARV, the after repaired value, the ARV minus repairs times 65% equals the MAO, maximum allowable offer. So it's the ARV, which stands for after repaired value, minus repairs, times 65% equals maximum allowable offer, or MAO, M-A-O. And, of course, you can substitute 70 for 65 or 50 for 65. Depends on how deep you want to buy or how shallow you want to buy, but it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, these days, you know, they used to 70% used to be good, but it's a buyer's market right now, so you should be down around 65%. That being said, if you buy a house for 70 with your 401k retirement, self-directed retirement funds, and you buy it for 70,000 and you sell it for 100,000 and you just carry the note at 10%, I mean, you're going to have a really great ROI. I mean, it's a really great return on your money. So, we need large margins because we're responsible for a lot, and a lot can happen, or in some cases not happen. Like if it takes you a little longer to sell something that you want, and then your house gets tagged or something by vandals or something, you got to go repaint a couple of things. So I mean, we have big margins because things can go wrong. It's a wonderful business because I've made sometimes some really bad mistakes, or I've had some really bad things happen to me. And if you do enough volume, things will happen. If you do enough houses, things will happen. So don't think that this happens every day, but as the years go by and you keep doing this, stuff will happen. So, it's a really great business when I could have something really bad happen, like I miss a $5,000 plumbing in the slab problem or something, and I still make money. I mean, I don't lose money. In some cases you can be off in your estimate of things by 20 grand or 25 grand and still break even. I mean, in most businesses, when you miss the mark 25 grand, you just lose 25 grand. You're out.
Right.
It sounds like maybe it's impossible to miss things by 25 grand, but as you go through, you'll take on different challenges. And if you take on some of these old houses that should have, and I don't suggest that you do this, and I'm telling you not to for this very reason, but before it's all over, if you're doing a lot of houses, you'll pick a house that really should have been torn down, and you'll, for some reason that day, think you're going to fix it. And you'll start.
Well, we've done some of those.
Ask me how I know. And then when you get about halfway through it, you'll say to yourself, man, we should have just tore this house down and built a new one for how much I'm spending. And then after you do that once, you won't do it anymore.
Yes.
So that's why some people will say, man, you're really trying to steal these houses. And I said, well, it's a lot of responsibility. It takes a lot of money, and a lot of people got to go into action to get this stuff done. And I'm not here to break even.
Yeah.
I'm averaging like 52% these days. Because it's just such a great buyer's market. But
yeah, now, and that's going to be on lower price houses more than if you're going to be at higher price houses. It's going to be a bit less than that.
Yeah, and it's also different parts of the country. I happen to have one of the most dynamic markets for this kind of business there's several regions that I know of, and I'm sure like you found a place right in California that kind of has the same kind of pricing that I have around here. And then I've talked to people in Alabama that actually have better spreads than I have.
Right.
And I've talked to people in Atlanta, that there's pockets of places. And when I say pockets, I don't mean like 10 or 15 houses. I'm talking about huge amount of inventory, but there's pockets.
Right.
Sometimes you have to travel a little bit out of your comfort zone, right? Like you might have to go 25 miles, 25 miles a different direction to get to where the bargains are, but
yeah,
it's worth the
Yeah, that's right. That's in my situation where I'm doing deals in California, but I'm actually in Virginia. And if I could do deals very easily in Virginia, I would simply have to go about 20, like you said, maybe 25 miles away. And I could do that. But then I don't want to drive and do it myself, so I choose to have a partner instead. And that works out really well. So
That's one thing that's kind of good about doing things from a distance because it forces you to have a team and have a delegation process because you can't be jumping in your car driving 50 miles round trip every time you turn around.
yeah, and I really like that. I really like that. I like to have a partner handling the work and putting in some of the money, and I think it's just great. So I'm thrilled with this arrangement. And what I try to do is not really do anything. And I've explained that I've explained that philosophy to people, but you really can do it. I mean, you really can.
I heard you're really good at doing nothing.
I'm really good at it. I've practiced a lot, and
Hey, doing nothing is an art.
it's a system. And of course, we're joking about it, but it's a system, and it's a number of systems. And I'll be trying to share some of the methods and techniques as we go along. I've certainly shown you how to look at valuations, and I've shown you how to use DocuSign and web zip form, so you can make offers and respond to offers electronically, so you could be anywhere for that. About the only thing that you really need to do is if you want to look at a house, but you can have someone else look at a house and take pictures of the house. And it's really simple now, especially with cell phones the way they are. So I don't know. There's not really a need to be out there anymore, in my opinion, and that's kind of my system. I do think that if you're not going to be able to be on site, you've got to visit that area and really learn the area first. It's not like you can get away with not ever being there, but after you've gotten used to it and learned the area, I don't think you have to keep coming back.
Yeah, that's one of the things about value that helps me a lot is, I know after 16 years, I know my town, and I know many, many, many of the neighborhoods by heart. So it gets to the point where I don't have to do anything. I always, kind of worry sometimes that I go too much by what I know, but then you just drive around the neighborhood, and if you see some for sale signs, pick up the phone and just make sure you haven't missed something, one way or the other, going up or going down, because sometimes you find out, wow, these houses have really gone up since, for what I remember,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, things happen in areas. There's transitions that take place. And these days, some of those transitions are, I wouldn't say they're like in a matter of weeks, but they're a matter of months. There's really some of these areas transitioning, in an interesting way. They're moving from rental markets where, let's say, professionals in another part of town own them and rent them out for and own them for cash. They're moving to more of the owner financing that we're talking about, or they're going from people owning those properties to losing them to being rentals again by investors or paying cash. So, you've got to be kind of on top of those transitions, and that's going to determine the LTV and the margins to a great extent.
Well, the changing neighborhoods from mostly renter occupied to predominantly owner or owner financed occupied can change the whole feel of the neighborhood because there's a different level of pride and respect for the properties. And we actually had thought about one time, a whole bunch of investors, and I say a whole bunch, a handful of us, 8 or 10 of us, we were going to focus on one neighborhood and try to buy all the houses that came up in that neighborhood to change the neighborhood. It never came to fruition because investors are kind of a rogue bunch, and they don't like to do anything that they don't want to do on the minute they don't want to do it. So it didn't work out, but the theory would have worked.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, we're making those transitions anyway because we're helping they're having renters become owners. It's a big improvement. So good candidates and bad candidates. Obviously, the LTV is the most important thing, but it's also other things. So I just made a list here of some things that are not a problem generally, that some of which people think are a problem. And actually, even things that are a problem, as we'll look at, aren't necessarily a problem. So it needs a roof, no big deal. It needs paint, siding, landscaping, carpet and tile, countertops, no big deal. What about appliances? Something needs appliances. Really, still no big deal.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, and the houses show a lot better with appliances, but unfortunately, there's sometimes you don't want to move appliances in before the person moves in, just because, unless, you can do that if you talk to the neighbors and someone's kind of watching out for you, but there's just places that I can't move my appliances in until the person moves in. So, and I never buy new appliances. I think it's ridiculous to buy new appliances. In the economic echelon that I'm dealing in, good, clean, used refrigerators and stoves and washers and dryers have never been questioned. They're very acceptable. I buy stoves anywhere from $250 to $325. I buy refrigerators for anywhere from $200 to $300. These are used, but they have, the guy I buy them from, this is what he does for a living, is repair and deal in used appliances, and he gives me a year warranty, no questions asked, and they very rarely break on me. I can hardly think of, in my career, maybe 20 out of 1,000 houses. So I also make it kind of clear when I'm selling these houses that, look, I'm selling that when they ask about the appliances or whatever, or as I go by and point out the appliances, I basically tell them, these are your appliances. I'm selling the house, not the appliances. I'm giving you these appliances, so they're yours. And I find to give up that $300 instead of getting a call in the middle of the night that the refrigerator went out and all their food's going bad, and what am I going to do about it? I just as soon make those appliances theirs right up front, and I don't have to deal with them. Maybe that's why I don't get calls about them.
Sure. Right. Well, they probably don't break that much, but I was just thinking about this. I think I told some people about this recently. We had this call from a person that's bought a house for cash, and she's trying to sell it because she called off our sign because she didn't have the $7,000 she said she needed for appliances.
It's ridiculous. If you want to go down and pay, $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 for a refrigerator, more power to you. But if you think you're going to keep that refrigerator, if that house ever goes vacant, that refrigerator will be going with it, with the people. And it's just not that big an issue. I don't get them anything fancy, but I try to get a black one if the house calls for that. I try to get a gray or one of those, stainless steel looking ones if that house needs that, or I get a white one, whatever the house needs. I try to get what the house needs, the color. I do, and I don't want to have, I want them to match in color, but unless you're selling a house for $150,000, $200,000, then you might start thinking about something newer. But even then, they have some really good-looking stuff, and you don't have to pay full retail.
Well, you don't even have to do appliances at all. You can sell a house without appliances.
Well, and think about it. A lot of people that are moving into the house already have appliances, and now they got a problem. And so a lot of times, the houses show better with appliances, but I've sold a ton of houses without appliances in them, a ton.
Yeah, and I just want to just stay with that for a moment because, the big block we have with a lot of folks is that they think they have to continue fixing things up and doing all this stuff that they've been doing. You don't have to. You just don't. You don't have to do any appliances. You could sell a house that needs appliances. You could sell a house with dirty carpets. You could sell a house, with a leaky roof. You could sell a house any of these ways if you want.
Yeah, and use them as bargaining chips. Someone says, "Well, the house needs appliances." I says, "Do you have the full down payment?" Just use it as a bargaining chip.
Yeah.
And when someone asks you for something, you always ask for something back. Can you buy the appliances, Mitch? Yeah, I could buy the appliances. Could you give me like a $2,000 non-refundable earnest money check today? Whatever. Just ask for something back. It's a basic negotiating rule, I think, isn't it, Richard? If you're asked for something, you've got to ask for something back. Because if you're too easy,
Right.
I mean, it's not that the $450 for the appliances was a problem for me, or the $800 for all the appliances and the washer and dryer total was a problem. It was like, wow, I just sold the house and I got to put $800 more into it, and I'm going to make X amount of thousands of dollars. It's not that I'm chintzy and fighting for every dollar, although that's not a bad concept. It's that if you give somebody something, then they're going to keep asking until you stop. So you've got to have resistance from the very beginning. Even when someone comes up and offers you, like, well, I want to do this and I want to put this much down, don't jump to say, yeah, that's great, let's do the deal. Kind of scratch your head and kick the ground a little bit and say, well, I don't know, I was thinking I was going to have to get more than that. Just have resistance.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. It makes people feel better. It makes them feel like they got as much as they could get, so they're much more likely to stick and to stay in your house.
And the people that are showing your house don't like this they don't really like it when it doesn't have clean carpets and tiles and the house stinks. One thing I try to do is just at least get the smell out of the house.
Right.
If you can't get the smell out of the house because it's from the carpet, I've still sold houses like that. But it's a little bit different price, and maybe the down payment's a little bit lower because you're saying, normally I ask for 10% and this is a, $60,000, $80,000 house, but since it needs some things, I'm only asking for 5% down, and you handle it. Put the color carpet in you want to. For all I know, you don't want carpet. You want tile. I don't know. If you want me to do all this stuff, then give me 10% down. I'll do it all. I'll put the roof on, and I'll replace the carpet. So everything's a bargaining chip.
Yeah.
And when I say you sell houses without doing this stuff, we don't sell them for the same price. You can't. You have to sell a non-fixed-up house at a non-fixed-up price, and you have to sell a fixed-up house at a different price because you got money in it. So if you use my basic formula, which you're trying to get a note for, as a benchmark, I'm trying to get a note for double what I have in the house. So I bought a house for $25,000 and it needs $15,000 worth of repairs. Then, that's $40,000. Then I'm looking to sell the house for like $85,000 or $87,000 with a down payment and leave me with a note $80,000 or bigger. But if I didn't want to put the 15 in it, or maybe I'm I do this a lot. I'm working on 2 other houses right now, and I can't get to this house. So while I can't get to it, I'm going to put a sign in the yard, and I'm going to owner finance it for $55,000 as is. See the difference in the price? $87,000 fixed up and $55,000 as is. I'm still doubling my money, but I got to offer the different price. And then if the house hasn't sold by the time I finish my other 2 projects I'm on, then I just move right over into that one and I start the repairs. But a lot of times I sell those houses to someone. There's people that actually dream about fixing up houses, their own house. Do you know that? There's people that there's a reason why those shows are on A&E, with the gardening and the painting and the texturing. There's a reason why they're on there, because people are watching them, because some people just have a hankering that they want to buy a house and they want to do it their way. And then they want to move in it. That's true, right, Richard?
Yeah, they do. I mean, a lot of people look at it as a thrill or something that they feel is, and it certainly gives them some ownership, some pride of ownership, which is really critical.
Yeah, and I love selling houses that way if I get enough, because everyone underestimates how much it's going to take to fix a house. And they get halfway through and they put all their money into my collateral, and then they have to either push through to finish, or sometimes they walk away because it's more than they thought. But I got a lot of improvements in the house. So, I like the not fix it up plan because someone else is fixing it up with their money. They're fixing up your collateral.
It's much better. I think of the things that we're talking about here, I think the best thing you could do, because the olfactory, the human sense of smell is the most important thing. It's like it goes to the reptilian brain. If you could get rid of a smell and nothing else, you'd be in great shape. The big thing is getting rid of smells. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, because
People don't want to be in the house very long if it smells bad. They just don't want to be there, and it gives them a very, very bad feeling about the value, even though it may not affect it at all because it may be easy to get rid of.
Yeah, I've had people come in and smell a stinky house that I was going to offer for the non-fixed up price, and then go away, and then I fixed it up, and they love the house, but they remember the filth in it, and they still feel like the house is dirty. You know, in their mind, I've just like covered up the filth, like somewhere underneath the tile that I just put down, the filth is still there, and they can't get over it.
Yeah. So that's why that's the one thing that's just, it's like a instinctual thing to not like bad smells. If you could do something about that, that would be the thing to fix up. Everything else is sort of optional.
Yeah, but I like these kind of repairs that are listed on this. You know, these are all things that they make a big impact, or you can fix, you know. This is not a lot of detailed, what am I trying to say? They're easy things to get prices on, so they're easy things to make a budget with, as opposed to, you know, we've got to take out this wall and move this window and adjust, you know, put a doorway here, and you know, when you start like reconfiguring houses, that's where you're gonna burn some dollars and maybe get into some things that you don't expect.
Yeah, so these are good ones if you want to do them. But again, I just want to say they really are optional. You really can just do this business and not fix up anything if you don't want to. And there are advantages to it that we've talked about. So these are ones we just think you should avoid. Old houses. This is a big thing. Now, a lot of places have old houses, but we're talking about especially like Victorian houses or, you know, really old houses. I guess, what do we define as really old? Houses built in the 20s or 30s? 19th century?
Yeah, because some of the houses built in those days, they just put newspaper in the walls to keep the wind from blowing through, and I don't really understand it. It's really interesting when you start to re-sheetrock or do some of those houses, because I find my workers like sitting around reading the newspaper from 1920 and not doing their work because it's so interesting to read those newspapers. Have you seen that? They have the paper in
yeah. It is very interesting.
The only remedy for that is to like take out every wall in the house and put the insulation in. Or I mean, I guess they have some blown-in stuff now, but it's just really a pain.
Right.
And that's one thing you can't see with your eyes. You might think, well, all I got to do is, you know, straighten out the foundation and put a roof on this thing and paint it. It's pretty good. If you start getting into old houses, make sure you look for insulation problems.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, plumbing, bathrooms, kitchens, I mean, they don't have to be redone, but you get into a lot of issues people just don't like, and then you get into a lot of, it could be expensive maintenance. I didn't put down HVAC here, but sometimes the heating and the air conditioning is really bad. The ducts can be bad, but I don't know. It still could be sold, but I would kind of beware of really old houses, especially Victorian houses. I wouldn't do any old Victorian houses at all.
Yeah, let's go watch the movie Money Pit, and it'll cure you of that.
Yeah.
And then real quickly about smell. One last thing. I just had this happen to me. I couldn't get the smell out of a house, and I you know, used the basic. I'd used all the chemicals for smell. I had used bleach and water. I did everything before we put the new carpet down, and the house still seemed to stink. I couldn't figure it out, and when we did figure it out, there was rat feces really thick in the air conditioner ducts, and so we had to redo some ducts and take it all out. So sometimes if you can't find a smell, check your AC ducts.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I thought you were going to say a dead rat, but that you can tell. That's very distinctive.
And that too. I mean, there was that along with it, but you know, and when it gets to be hot and you don't have these things air conditioned while they're sitting there, boy, it gets horrible odor. I haven't been able to sell the house for 2 months, and I couldn't figure out where the problem was coming from, but I finally figured it out. Yeah, other things to look out for is there's some homes built by shoddy builders. There's also neighborhoods that just have found settling issues. Like there's just neighborhoods that I know that have settling problems, and I don't know.
You're in an area where there's a lot of problems with settling because of the soil or something, but in California and here in Virginia we don't have that, but we have other issues. High water table, that's an issue we have here quite a lot. There's a whole areas where, I mean, I would buy and sell houses, but I wouldn't live in the houses myself because I'm very sensitive to it, but they're all moldy, dank, musty smells that you cannot ever get rid of, especially because there's part of the house that has a subterranean part. They call them a walkout here. It's not a basement. They call it a basement, but it's really not because they have windows and everything. But some of it is below the ground, and it's just the water seeps in, the moisture seeps in. It's always got mold. No way around it. And sometimes there's actually water puddled on the floor. I mean, it's that bad, and you can't get rid of it. So I would deal with those houses because that's just, people don't seem to mind that much, but I'd be really careful. So we have that problem. And then in California, California has termites, terrible termite problems. I've never had it interfere with my buying or selling a house, but I've had to do termite work. And I've sold houses literally that were so full of termites you could listen and go in and poke your head under the house, because most of them have a crawl space under the house, and you could actually hear the termites chewing away at the wood.
Wow. That's pretty. You can hear them.
You could hear them, yeah. But I mean, it's not something that's fatal to the enterprise. As bad as they were, we tented the house, killed the termites, and we did some some rebuilding, and it was fine. And that was the worst I've ever seen.
And then another thing I've noticed, here's a little thing you just kind of learn over time. Some neighborhoods, the lots are terraced. Like it's one lot and then it terraces down 4 or 5 feet, and there's another lot and then it terraces down. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Or there's some
right.
place
Oh
where
yeah, definitely on a hillside.
There's a terrace on one side of the house. That's the house that has a chance where they put some fill in, and the terrace side is likely the one where the foundation will slope down into the terrace because they dug the top of the lot, down to the stone or the solid foundation of the land, but they pushed that dirt to the side, maybe to widen that lot a little bit or something, and that dirt wasn't compacted well or well enough. And so when you buy in houses that are on the terrace, you need to check and see how the erosion problems are, and I won't be surprised if you see there's at least a slight slope to that side.
The trouble we have here in Virginia, and probably a lot of the East Coast where there's a lot of rain, is that when we have that kind of situation, inevitably the fill dirt compacts and the water starts to flow towards the house and not away from the house, and then you end up having not just floods, but you just have a lot of mold and a lot of damage inside the house, and you do have floods. And so everything's fine for a year or two, but then that fill compacts from all the rain continually flowing through it, and all of a sudden you've got torrents of water pouring into the house. I've had that happen in a number of houses.
One way, to look at a house. I mean, you're looking at this house, like what's the neighborhood like, and then you look at it from a different angle and say, well, are there a lot of gangs around here? And then you look at it another way, and you might look at it from the way of water. Can you walk around the house and imagine where all the water falls to the ground, and which direction does it go? If it's going towards your house, you need to solve the problem. If you can't solve the problem of the water going towards the house, then you have to think, I would think really hard about buying the house, because there's very few problems that you can't solve. And then there's that one that you can't see that Richard's talking about, which is the water table that comes up from the bottom. And you just can't, you can't see that sometimes, but you can smell it sometimes because of the mold, or you can see the mold of the leftovers for when it was wet during a rainy season. But I always look at houses. I always notice when the front yard's sloping towards the front door, or when the backyard's really high at one end and it's running right to the back of the house. I always look at those problems. and they can be solved usually with gutters and French drains. But at the end of the day, that water has to have some way to get around the house. And if you can't figure that out, you might want to pass.
That's really true, because those are really major deals. That's major issues, and that's just not good. It's just way beyond the cosmetic. And then here on the last thing we have is high crime. Now, we've both invested in some really high crime areas. Is there a rule there or something that you would generalize?
Well, I try to look at the 3 or 4 houses across the street and the 2 houses on the right and the 2 houses on the left that are next to me to see how those people are handling their houses. If those people have some pride, and then there's a really good chance that they've kind of combined together to watch their street or to watch their section of the street, you know. The one thing you don't want to do is buy a house with gang members living next door, or some kind of vacant crack house that's real prolific. They'll just steal you blind. I mean, you can't leave a nail out and they'll take it. And plus, I just don't like to be that close to them. To me, they're dangerous, and I just as soon go find another house.
Yeah, I agree. I've had a house across from a liquor store, or next to a liquor store. I wouldn't buy that house either again. That could be really bad news. It just attracts a bad element of people and a lot of crime and drug dealing. It's just not good. Generally, a house right next to a commercial, to a commercial kind of enterprise, you have to be kind of careful, I think, in general.
I once looked at a house that 4 or 5 people had been killed in, and it wasn't at the same time. It was all in separate years.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that house.
Yeah, and I could have stole that house, and there was nothing wrong with this house at all. I just didn't need it. You know, it's
Right.
just not worth it.
Right.
Now, whatever's going on in that house, I don't want to know.
Right. Yeah. So right next to a crack house, right next to a liquor store, right next to any kind of commercial building, you got to kind of be careful. That's just a big negative. Yeah, I mean that's about it. I mean, and then people talk about having a house in a war zone. I mean, it's not necessarily the worst thing to have a house in a high crime area. I wouldn't go out there at night, but it's not you just have to realize you're not living there, and a lot of times it's fine.
Sometimes, you can get some of these houses at such a great price because of these problems. I mean, they almost give you the house. Like, I've bought houses for $7,500 that was just incredible price for the house, because there's no way you could build anything close to it for that amount of money. But I didn't want to be there for some of the reasons we just discussed. But when I see a house like that, I've learned to take free throws at it, like a free shot. And I just try to negotiate the deal that says, can I put this under contract for 60 days? And if I can find the right person to move into that house or to buy it, I will take it down. But I'm a little afraid of this neighborhood, and it's the reason why you haven't been able to sell it in 760 days. But I will go to work because I offer something that you're not offering, and I'll see if I can do this. And then what I do is I get the really low price, and I just mark it up $5,000 and try to flip it to a brave investor who doesn't care. And believe me, there are investors out there that they're not afraid of that. They might be a member of that gang.
Yeah.
I just put the sign out in the yard, and I bought it for $7,500. I put it up for $13,500, and I'm never going to go down there. And the one thing about houses like that, you can just leave the front door open, because if you lock it, they're just going to kick it in. So just leave the front door open and hurry up and sell it while it's still a house. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But if it doesn't, I would lose my earnest money deposit, which obviously I wouldn't want to put up very much.
Yeah, that's a good point for a real problematic situation. That's a great point.
Take a free throw, take a free shot.
Yeah.
Ask for everything you want, and they don't give it to you. What? But if they give it to you, now you're open for business to put an extra $5,000 in your pocket real quick.
Yeah, it's great. I want to revisit something, Mitch. I want to revisit this. You've talked to me about this before, about water damage, because there are a lot of times perceptions that are much worse than the realities. Um,
Yeah, well, water can almost always be fixed. I mean, water's not that hard to figure out. It usually, like 98% of the time, it runs downhill. So, you know, I mean, there are those times that it'll run uphill, and that's from wind, or if your house tips over. But that's a mobile home joke, you guys. Yeah, water can almost always be fixed, and it's one of the major reasons why people sell. And they keep doing the foundation, and they keep redoing it until they've had it, and they just want to get rid of this house. And to them, they have a huge problem, so that's why you're going to buy it. And the problem is they've never stopped the water from running from the sidewalk to the foot of the foundation. And a lot of times this can be fixed with French drains. Does everyone know what a French drain is? Do I need to explain that, Richard?
Yeah, let's explain French drains, because they really do solve a lot of problems.
Let's say I'm standing out in the street and I'm facing the front door of this house. I'm standing on the sidewalk, and the sidewalk's higher than the threshold of the front door. So all the water in the front yard is running right to the house. So what we do is we go, like, you know, put your flower beds in and everything, and then right in front of the flower beds, you dig a trench that's like, you know, 12 inches to 18 inches wide and about the same depth. And then you put gravel or stone rocks in the bottom of it, and that's where you can adjust the elevation, because you're going to put pipes on top of this. The first, say, 3 inches or 4 inches is this gravel. It might even be the first 8 inches at one end, and then at the other end it's only 2 inches of gravel, because you got to make this slope. Because the next thing you do is you set your pipe down in that trench on top of that gravel, and that pipe's got holes in it, and the holes go to the bottom, and they're like it. The holes in this pipe is called French drain pipe, is what we call it. I don't know what it's perforated pipe.
Right.
And you put the holes to the bottom, and the holes are at like 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock on the pipe, and you set them at the bottom. So, and then you fill it up with gravel up to the top with gravel, and what you've done is the water will run down and it'll hit this trench, and because it's gravel, it'll fall down to the bottom of that trench. It'll seep through the rocks and the gravel, and when it hits the dirt at the very bottom of this trench, the water will build up, and as it builds up, it goes into those holes in the pipe, and then the pipe has to be facing, you know, it has to be running downhill. The water, with a very slight angle, will find its way out. And you would do this trench in a perfect manner. You'd go all the way across the front and down both sides of the house, and then let the water out, you know, past the back of the house. And so you're just funneling this water that's coming towards your front door, falls in the French drain, and then it runs around the right and left side of the house. And that would stop that problem. And people don't know to do that. And it's not cheap, but it's not expensive. It's way less expensive than repairing a foundation every, you know, 3 or 4 years. So the other thing is gutters. You can save a lot of water from hitting the ground just by using gutter systems.
Right. Yeah, you need to have them, and if you don't have them, you get this water just can accumulate in one part, kind of erode the soil, and then create a kind of a little ditch that will direct the water into your house. The French drains.
The other way to do it is like build your flower beds up a little bit, or have the earth of the flower bed be low at the front and high against the slab, so that causes a swale that would push the water around the side of the house. So there's a couple of ways. There's a lot of ways to.
And that's pretty cheap to do. That's just, you might have to bring some fill in. That's about it. That's a cheap thing to do.
Yeah, that's cheap and very effective. You know.
Yeah, that's true. So don't be afraid of this. You can fix these problems quite easily. Okay, so let's talk about plan A, B, C, and D. Kind of interesting. A lot of people are looking at, you know, kind of one way of doing things, but there may be at least 4, maybe more. And I think you hit on one earlier when you said you can take a problem property, tie it up with a 60-day closing, and then assign the contract to an investor for $5,000. That's like really cool. Sell before you take title. That's plan A. You don't necessarily go in with that plan, but maybe you do. That's a great plan sometimes. Love that plan. I did business for a while. All we did was that plan.
Well, the reason why it's plan A is you have to make, you have to know that's what you're going to do right, before you do anything. So that's the reason why it's plan A. We're not saying it's the best plan. We're just saying this is the logical. I mean, if you're going to do this step, it'll be at the beginning. It'll be before any of these could ever even have a chance to happen. So, and then plan B.
We're trying to
let's
get
talk about plan A again, because there's another way to sell before you take title. You don't have to get rid of the house. Like, you don't have to buy it for $7,500 and then have someone that wants to pay $13,500 and then go to closing and get your cash, get your $5,000 out. You could buy it, have 60 days, make sure that you have access, make sure you have permission to have access, and then put a sign in the front yard. You could owner finance it. You could offer owner finance terms, and you could kind of say to yourself, I'm willing to owner finance this person, but I'm not really sure if my values are right, or this is just a weird neighborhood. I'm not comfortable of my estimations of what things go for around here. If I can find someone to rent this, to owner finance this house, if I can find someone with $5,000 down, if I can find someone to pay me $750 a month, then I'll go ahead and take this house down. If I don't find someone that wants owner financing under my terms and conditions within 60 days, then I'm not going to take this house down. So but the only difference between the first one, where you're buying it for cash and you're selling it for, marking it up and selling it for cash to another investor or wholesale deal, is this one is you've got to have, you're going to have more access, or you're going to have access, and the house is probably going to have to be semi-livable or somewhat livable. I don't know, maybe not. But I know that you have to have access, and you have to have time, and you have to have your strike price in writing, and then you can start to sell a house before you actually end up owning it.
Right.
I've done that. I've done it hundreds of times.
Yeah, that's terrific. And that's could be your plan A, and then your plan B can be something else.
Yep.
Plan B could be fixing up.
Plan B is the most popular. Plan B is the most popular, the most done plan probably of all. Buy, put a little money into it, or put a lot of money into it. But you buy it, and you fix it up, and then you sell it. Plan C has never been popular, and I kind of feel like, at least in my town, I'm the one making this popular, because people don't believe they can do it. People absolutely don't believe you can sell a house, with the cat urine and the dog poop still on the carpet. But you can. But you got to give the cat urine, dog poop price. So, there's the example again. I bought a house for a 25 and owner financed it for 55 instead of buying it for 25, putting 15,000 in it and selling it. That means you have 40 total in it, and trying to sell it for 85 or 87. So you're left with a note twice the size of your 40,000 investment. So, but I really like Plan C. Plan A and Plan C are my favorite plans of all time.
Right.
Because they take very little risk. Plan C, when it works out perfect, you buy it and you don't fix it up, but the person that moves in puts $10,000 or $15,000 of their own money into your house, and it almost just solidifies that deal so well for you that you could sleep at night and never worry. If the guy says he's going to have to move out in 2 years, you say, good deal, I'll see you later, and hand me the keys, because I can't wait, because I'm going to sell the house now for way more, because you put a bunch of money into it. It's a nice house now. So you just don't worry about that house going sideways.
That's
and
a wonderful.
Plan B, the wholesale. I want to talk to the people out there that have jobs and they're trying to do some stuff part time, and they don't have time to watch your crew all day because they're at work. Maybe or you don't have any money. You haven't worked on raising any private money. You haven't ever done a deal before. I'm talking to you. Then go out and get a deal under contract, and then make yourself $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. It's really not important how much money you make off the wholesale deal. What's important is that you come back with some money and you show your spouse, hey, I tried this and it worked, and I think if I get better at this, I should make more than what I just made, and I think I could do it over and over again. You know, but one of the happiest, one of the things I like best when I'm talking to people or helping people is when they wholesale that very first deal in their life and they come home with a paycheck. And I don't care if it's $2,000 or it's $8,000. I just, you know, it's a defining moment when a person does their first deal and some money goes in their pocket.
Yeah.
It's a confidence builder.
Right.
And the other thing I like to say is, even for some of you guys for some of the people that have done, you know, 5 houses, 10 houses, 20 houses, 50 houses, you know, there's days when you just need some money. So go find a house and don't go for the $25,000. Just grab yourself 5, 6, 7, 8 grand and solve your problem, and, you know, get relaxed. I mean, so many times I see people, man, I really need to make a sale today, and I said, well, why don't you just wholesale one of your houses? You can pick up the phone and wholesale a house probably by the end of the day and solve that problem. You know, someone, you know, so the theory is that a real investor knows that there's another deal tomorrow. So, and there's another deal the day after that, and there's another deal next week, and there's another deal. There's always another deal. So if you need some money, give someone a fantastic deal and get yourself some money and move on.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes that's just the best thing. Not necessarily ideal, but the best thing. So, yeah, I think this is great. Really, really good ideas here. Really, really good. So let's talk about this a little bit more. One of the things that I've done, you can kind of keep some MLS listing if there's one, and kind of reuse it, and you don't have to kind of relist it. Sometimes that works pretty well if you have the cooperation of the agent. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, like, just don't close it out, right?
Right. Yeah, it makes it much simpler, much easier to just keep it open, and then you don't have to file new paperwork on it or anything. Much simpler.
Yeah, there's different situations. Like, you're talking about selling a house before you take title.
Right.
You know, you can use signs. Well, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Well, I guess you always can, but here's the rub. Sometimes people don't understand when you're trying to sell their house before you bought it. They just won't understand. And if you got that sense that this person's not going to understand, but that's your plan, I always try to sell my houses before I buy them. If I'm low on inventory, if I got lots of inventory, I'm not such a rush on it. But the one thing you do, like, almost everyone will give you 30 days to close. Now, if you don't own the house and the people live in the house, this is going to be a problem. It probably won't work.
Right.
If the house is semi-livable, you know, and has windows you can see through, and you can get access somehow, then start to sell before you own. And when I say access, I would never access a house that had anyone's stuff in it. But it has to be empty, not just vacant, but empty, you know, because you don't want to access with people's belongings.
Well, this is where the 9-day house sale really, really works out well. We have a course on it, but basically you can have a weekend where you sell the house, and you can pay your tenants or the owners, if they know about it, to leave for just to be away, or you can even do it over one day, and just have everybody come over one day, look, they all make offers and bids, then you do like a round robin on the phone at night, and the winning bid gets the house. And had lots and lots of success with that with students, very successful. And it doesn't impose a lot on the people that are living in the house. It imposes a little bit, but not a lot. So so that's one way you can do it. If the house is not empty, you can pay them to leave while you either do 1 or 2 days to sell the house, and you sell the house in a single weekend. It's like taking a 2 or 3 month cycle and compressing it into a weekend. And you could do a 9-day house sale just for the down payment. You could fix the monthly payments and just have people bid on how much down they're going to put in.
Yeah, I've done a couple of those.
Worked out well, huh?
Yeah, it did. That's kind of a neat idea to pay your tenants to leave. That's
Yeah, like on a weekend, so they can kind of have a nice time and get away. They don't have to be away both, all weekend. They could just be away, during the day, or, certainly helps if they're away all weekend.
Yeah, here's tickets to SeaWorld in a room at Motel 6 for the night. I'll see you on Monday.
Right. Right. And another thing you could do, I suppose, Mitch, and I haven't done this, but you could use signs if you say $700 down plus down payment, or $700 a month plus down payment, and have a phone number. Then you could put those signs around. You couldn't put a sign on the house, but you might be able to sell the house using signs, just not having the address on the signs, and not putting a sign in front of the house.
Right. So you would meet them and escort them to the house, and then escort them back.
Or you could just give them you could just tell them to drive by the house. If they called, they listen to a voicemail, and if they were interested and they qualified, you could just have them drive by the house and look at the outside.
Yeah, please don't disturb the people in the house.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that you could do. So certainly an empty house is a lot easier, but these are some ideas even if the house is occupied that could work. I don't want to discourage you from doing this, because there could be a lot of ways of selling a house, even if it's already owned and you don't have any risk. It's the best way of doing it.
Sometimes it's hard to talk about these scenarios because there's so many variables. Whenever you get into a mentorship or something, we start to get to specifics. It's a lot easier to answer the question. Like, all right, tell me about the house. Someone in it? No. Has it got stuff in it? Yes. Okay, that's different than if there's nobody in it and there's no stuff in the house. There's just everything. Every little piece of information causes a different decision. And so,
right. And one of the things could be the neatness of the occupants. Some people are just horrendous, and some people are really, you can show that house is beautiful, the way that they keep their stuff, and they have clutter-free, and there's no dishes, and there's in the kitchen and dirty dishes, there's no, toothpaste stuck to the sink, and they're just neat, and other people are the opposite.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
All right, so let's look at the overall deal, how it works. Let's see. Basics of the closing. Let's talk about that. You got to have somebody that's going to wire money. Either you or your lender are going to wire money to the escrow or the settlement agent. Then they record the deed and the deed of trust for the mortgage. Whoever puts in the money should get a lender's title policy in their favor, and you or whoever's buying the house gets the title of the property and a first lien on the property. So a lot of people ask me, like, well, I don't know how to do a wrap, or I don't know how to do a note, or, well, you don't have to know how to do that. You don't ever have to do that. That's what you give to the title company or to the settlement agent. They type out the note. They do all that. You don't really have to do that. You get people, your escrow officer does everything, really.
You need a contract that explains the terms of what you're doing.
That's all you need. And you can say, we're going to do a wrap, and it's going to be 10.5% interest for $95,000, and wraps the existing first. And then the escrow will figure out all the technical details. Have you ever seen some of these papers, these deed of trusts? They're tiny print, and they're really, really long, and who reads them? You don't have to read them. Somebody has to fill out the paperwork who knows what they're doing, and you're already paying them to know what they're doing. So you don't really have to know all that stuff. You just write it out what you want. That's basically all you have to do. And that's really the basics of it. There's really like two kinds of scenarios for settlement. One of them is where you have an escrow, and one of them is where you use an attorney. I've done both. In California, the escrow agent gets all the paperwork. You literally sign everything in advance, and then they close, called closing escrow, and nobody's there except those people. So you, the buyer, the seller, the lender, nobody has to be there. It's all done by the escrow company and the title company on the day it closes. Then the other way of doing it is what we do in other places, many other places, where you go to an attorney's office and you sit around a table and you all sign papers on the day of the closing. So those are like the two ways of doing it. But regardless of that, you can always have someone else do your closings for you. You can sign a power of attorney. You can have someone else be an officer of your LLC or a trustee of your trust. And that way you don't have to attend the closing. And in an escrow state like California, you don't have to attend the closing anyway because nobody attends the closing. It's all done in advance. So this is really, what I'm saying is you can do this in a kind of a hands-off thing. What you really want to do, though, is you want to make sure everything's right, before the closing. But you don't have to attend the closing, and you don't have to, be really intimately involved beyond approving the paperwork before the closing.
Yeah, the only thing that's not on here that might be hands-on is someone's got to insure this place. And it shouldn't close if there's not an insurance policy in place and ready to go. So,
yeah, that's a great point.
If you do, then the house is exposed. I mean, it's going to have exposure. But so if I'm buying the house from a seller, then I got to go get insurance. If I'm selling the house to a buyer, then I got to encourage them and make sure that they have a title. Not a title. They have a regular homeowner's insurance policy binder paid for and all signed up before or at this closing.
Yeah, that's a huge point, actually. Huge point. Insurance, because you, the lender, are exposed if they don't have insurance. Whoever your lender is exposed if the house burned down or something. And then there's also liability. The owner of the house is exposed to liability, which you don't really want that. If somebody trips and falls or hurts himself or whatever in the house that's a visitor or whatever, you don't want to have a big legal mess. So that's why they need to get a homeowner's policy. That's a good point. That can be somewhat, usually not a big issue, but in some parts of Florida it's an issue. In some areas where there are floodplains or on the coast, the insurance can be more of an issue than you might think. In certain markets, it can be a really bad issue. So normally it's easy, but in some places it can be very difficult.
It's also somewhat of an issue if the house is vacant or going to be vacant for over 30 days. So
yes,
you got to read your policy really well, and you got to talk to your insurance person and tell them exactly what it is you want to do and how it's going to go. Because it's not going to do any good for you to lie about it and tell them, the house is occupied when it's not, because when it burns down, they're going to know it wasn't occupied.
Yeah, you may want to hire somebody or have a friend stay there so that you're not having the house vacant beyond 30 days. I mean, for real, because if it is vacant for more than 30 days, a lot of times the policy doesn't have to cover a loss from fire or vandalism because it only covers it vacant up to 30 days.
Well, you have to get an investor's type insurance, which is going to be more expensive, that deals with that issue. Because there's no sense in getting the insurance policy that's not going to deal with vandalism or fire. I mean,
yeah, but that could be quite expensive in an area if it's a bad area and it's vacant. So sometimes it's prohibitively expensive. So that's something to really think about. The best thing is not to have it be vacant, really, for very long. I had an $8,000 policy one time. I had to, it was only for a few months. It was $8,000 because it was a vacant property in a bad area. And I could not get any other insurance on it. But I'm glad you pointed that out about the need to have the homeowner, the buyer, have the insurance. So just quickly here, we've talked a little bit about escrow and title. They don't have to be the same company. Some places it will be the same. You can have a title company that also does your escrow, or you can have an escrow company and a title company. In other areas, other states, it's always the same. There's no escrow. It's just a title company that does everything. Attorneys versus settlement agents. In some places like California, people don't generally engage an attorney for real estate transactions at all, but everybody uses settlement agents, or in that case escrows. Sometimes I like to have an attorney, even in places like California. I generally do, but I don't have them actually handle my closing for me. Recording the deed, usually what you'll see is that the title company will generally want to record the deed first thing in the morning. Some recorders, courthouses, they have the title companies do the recording in the very beginning before anybody else has access, because that way they can make sure there's no liens that have been put on. during the day. If they record later in the day, there could be liens that were recorded earlier in the day. So usually they like to close like at 8 a.m. To record the deed and perfect the security interest, meaning filing the mortgage or deed of trust. Mortgages versus deed of trust. Deed of trust is generally a private sale of the property. It's not a court-ordered sale, and it's also sometimes called, the foreclosure process is called non-judicial foreclosure. Texas is a deed of trust state. Virginia is a deed of trust state. California is a deed of trust state. Nevada, Arizona. There are some notable mortgage states, Florida, Illinois, Michigan, New York. There are mortgage states, and a mortgage means that there's a foreclosure process that involves the court. Somebody has to file, the lender has to file a foreclosure action, and then there's usually a period of time where there's a hearing and there's what's called a lis pendens, which is like basically it's a lien on the house. It's notice that there's a legal action involving the house, so the house can't be sold at that point with a lis pendens on it. And then there's a sale, and even after the sale, sometimes there's a redemption period, especially for owner-occupied houses. It could be 9 months or a year, and during that redemption period, the homeowner has a right to buy the property back by paying all the arrears and getting a new loan. So that can be sometimes really a bad thing. Sometimes lenders will pay the homeowner some extra money or settle with the homeowner, and the homeowner will agree to give up their redemption rights. But mortgage is generally much more expensive and difficult to foreclose on than a deed of trust. Basically, that's the bottom line. So if you're in a mortgage state, you might want to consider closing first on a lease option or a contract for sale or a contract for deed or land contract, as they call it, neither of which delivers title to the buyer until some future time. So you can have a period where you make sure the buyer really keeps making the payments. And if you have a contract for sale or you have a lease option, there's no reason why you can't sell an underlying note on that property to an investor either, is there?
No, you can do that.
No reason at all, right, Mitch?
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah. Be no problem. No problem. It's really almost the same situation as if you sell the house and transfer title, but you're transferring title at a future point once they've made a certain number of payments or once they've gone over a certain period of time where they paid on time. And that way you're not just transferring title to somebody in a state where if it's a problem, it may take you a long time to get the house back.
Yeah, you really need to talk to your attorney about this because it's different in all different places. Like, we can do a contract for deed, but we have to file it at the courthouse, so it's of public record.
Yeah, I really think you have to talk to your attorney, but from my understanding, and I wouldn't want you to depend on my understanding, that's really a Texas-specific thing. Lease options are kind of a problem in Texas, and land contract for deed or land contracts have to be recorded. In many other places, they don't have to be recorded, and you can do lease options for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It's just a lease with an option to buy the property, and it doesn't have to be recorded. And why is that important if it has to be recorded or not?
Well, because someone could go resell the house and resell the house and resell the house on a contract for deed. If there was no public record, there's no place for an unsuspecting buyer to go find out if someone else has any rights to this property. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why the contract for deed law got put in here, is because people were selling a house contract to deed for someone, and then, you know, when they were late on their first payment, were telling the people that they didn't own the house anymore, and they go sell it to another person on a contract for deed. And, you know, it was just causing a mess.
Yeah,
so there are very unscrupulous people doing that, and they know better not to do that. But it's just, you know, one bad apple always going to ruin the whole thing. So.
But from the owner's point of view, from your point of view as an owner, you really don't want to record a lease option or a contract for deed. You really don't want to. Once you record that, if the buyer screws things up, or the lessee, or what they call the vendee, screws things up, then you have to a lot of times go to court and get a quiet title action, or else the title company won't insure the title when you transfer the property to someone else. So it's kind of a problem, actually.
Yeah, the other thing about contract for deed in Texas, just while we're talking about it, is it also has special end-of-year reportings that you have to do. And the reason why people don't like contract for deeds is because the penalty for not sending out a report to different people that are involved in the house between January 1st and January the 31st is like $250 a day, I think, up until the value of the house. So like if you didn't send the occupant his balance at the end of the year, his interest that he paid, and if he owes any late fees, or you have to send him a statement of his standing. And if you don't, the penalty is like $250 a day to the value of the house. So technically, if you didn't send one of those forms because you forgot one year, at the pace of $250 a day, the owner would own your house soon.
They'd own you.
Yeah.
So, but nevertheless, those are very good strategies to talk to your attorney about and to use, especially in places like Michigan, Illinois, Florida. And another one is something that we call possession before closing. So a lot of times, normally you don't give possession to a property before you close, but you can. And you could have a rental agreement that governs, and in the meantime, it could be a 6-month period where you let someone stay in the house. They pay you every month the same amount as they're going to pay you on their monthly payment, and when they buy the property, and you close in 6 months. And then if they screw things up and don't pay you, you don't have to close, and you can evict them. So that's another way you can do it in a place where it's kind of hard to get title back real quick if someone doesn't pay. Again, you need a lawyer to do it, but that could be a great way to do it.
Yeah, the main thing is if you're going to let someone in your house before they own it, you need to really look at how much they're giving you as a down payment up front. And I say down payment, in this case it would be a non-refundable rental deposit.
Right.
And, non-refundable rental deposits can be whatever two people agree on. So don't, if someone says, well, that looks like a down payment. So, I don't really care what it looks like. It says right here that it's a non-refundable deposit. So it can look like whatever it wants to, but this is what it is.
Right. So that's why you need a lawyer to do it. But once you get this working in your area, you could use the same contract over and over and over again, and just check with the lawyer periodically if there's any changes in the law. But you could have a great contract that you use and just work super well in your state. And again, you don't really need to do this, but if you're in a mortgage state with judicial foreclosure and a redemption period, you might want to consider something like that. So we've given you 3 different ways of doing it: lease option, contract for deed, or contract for sale, or land contract, same word, different word, same thing, or possession before closing. The note, like I said, the terms you got to agree on and tell the settlement agent, but you don't have to actually write out a note or really know much of anything beyond that. That's kind of it. I mean, I don't want to belabor this because we're focusing a lot more on finding money and finding houses and things like that. This is really a mechanical process. I think we've shared with you some things that will be helpful that you won't hear anywhere else that you really need to hear. I do want to shift this over the last few minutes talking about just some rules about fix-up, just some general rules about fixing property up, if we could, and also some another issue that we get. In fact, why don't we just talk quickly about title problems before closing, because maybe that might be then we can talk about fixing up. I think that's probably what we should do. Do you read the preliminary title report yourself, Mitch? Do you bother with that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I have an office that does.
Yeah, so somebody does. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, generally what there'll be on the preliminary title report will be property taxes and the first lien from the lender. And then it'll be anything else that may be liens on there. It could be liens on the person, like a tax lien, an IRS tax lien, or it could be a judgment that somebody sued them and won a judgment, or it could be a mechanic's lien because someone did some work on the house and didn't get paid and they filed a mechanic's lien. So these are the different kinds of liens that could be on the title report. Sometimes a bankruptcy might be on there from one of the owners. A divorce could affect it. So these are title issues. They're not necessarily problems, but they're issues. My favorite way of buying a house is subject to existing liens, because I like to have existing liens because then I don't have to put up much cash or any cash. And sometimes I buy properties that have tax liens, mechanics liens, and then I'll negotiate them down, and it cuts down on the purchase price of the house. So there's no reason to be afraid of these things. I bought houses that had 5 or 6 liens on the house. Not a problem. So, but you know, you kind of want to understand what they are and what's involved. I don't think there's a whole lot here. What about if you can't get all the owners to reach all the owners? How do you handle that? I think you have some interesting experience with that one that I don't have on that particular issue.
Well, I mean, if you can't get clear title, but clearly you feel confident that no one's coming back, you know, no one's coming back for this house, or the person that you can't find is, like, for example, last time they saw him was homeless on the street in Chicago 5 years ago. You know, chances of him coming back are pretty slim. But still, it's a possibility. So you use that to negotiate the price. Like no one's gonna be able to get a loan for this house. No one, and no one's gonna want to pay a lot for this house because there's always the chance that, you know, the homeless guy from Chicago is going to show up and he is going to have a home. It's going to be yours. And so, you know, let's say the house. I was looking at a house in my neighborhood the other day that was like, you know, probably a $35,000 house as is, the way it sat with all the work that it needed. And so when I found it had this title issue, I just said, look, no one's going to buy this house. I guess this is why this house has been vacant all this time. And he said, yes, because we can't sell it because we can't get clear title, so no one will buy it. So it's been sitting here vacant for 5 years. I said, okay, well, how about this? How about I give you $7,500 cash, and let's just call it a day, and I'll accept it with the unclear title. And he took it. So why would Mitch pay $7,500 for a house that he can't get title to? Because I looked at the house, and it didn't need all that much to fix up, maybe $3,000 bucks. So now I'm into this house, $10,500, and I moved a renter in for $750 a month, and that house will always be a rent house because I can't own or finance it to someone in good conscience because it doesn't have a clear title. So it's just a rent house, and at the pace of $750 a month, you know, I get back my 10.5 soon enough. I don't even need to do the calculator. I don't need to know how many months it is exactly. I just know that if the homeless guy doesn't show up from Chicago in the next year and a half, I got all my money back and I'm living on Easy Street. And I'll just keep doing that till the homeless guy shows up, and he's not going to show up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really wonderful.
So
you're not afraid of those things. It's just a matter of, again, it's all a matter of price. You're not necessarily afraid of that. You've got a strategy, and you can actually make money with that situation.
yeah, I mean, it just seems like for everything that there's a problem that's stopping you from doing something, you can use that problem in a different way, and it allows you to do something. This problem allowed me to buy a house for $7,500 that was worth $35,000. Why did the guy do that? Because he has to keep paying the taxes on the house. Why doesn't he rent it out? I don't know, and I don't care. I don't care. You know, I'm not going to ask him, hey, well, I got an idea. Why don't you rent this house? You know, I don't know why he didn't rent it. And I didn't ask him.
Yeah, we found that we got a boarded-up house that we're looking at buying right now, and it's been vacant for about 20 years, it looks like, because obviously there's going to be a lot of issues with it, but it looks like the title was transferred a long time ago, and through probate or whatever, and now it's cleared, but the heirs don't agree on what to do with the house. I don't really know how long it's been vacant, but it seems like a long time.
Yeah, you just got a stubborn heir. You've got it happens all the time. There's one black sheep that's just not going to do anything. It's going to hurt everybody.
Or maybe it disappeared somewhere and can't be reached and doesn't care. So.
Yeah, well, too. I would much go with the one who disappears and doesn't care against the one that wants to cause everyone grief, because that guy will come back.
Right. Well, I think we should probably. I think we probably have done enough for right now. I think next time we should get into the fix-up and then move on to the next part of what we're going to be talking about. So I think this is pretty good stuff right now. So do you want to talk about the fix-up stuff next week?
Yeah, because I don't think it's something you should gloss over. There's a saying, a popular saying in my industry, the house flipping industry. You make your profit when you buy the house.
Right.
You make your money when you buy, and then I, with all my falling down and getting back up, have rewritten the second sentence that should go with that, which is, and you lose it in the rehab.
Yeah,
When you
too
buy
true.
it, you lose it in the rehab.
Too true. All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you on the Q&A call we're having coming up.
All right. Bye. Bye, Richard.
Thanks. Bye bye.